Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and welcome to the first two cards I've made with the Simon Says Stamp May 2019 card kit. I will link to the card kit, but I'll also link to everything separately, just like I always do. So I'm starting off with the 3 alcohol pearl inks, and I've already done a video showing these inks, and I'll have it linked at the end. But unlike the regular alcohol inks, alcohol pearl inks need to be shaken up really well before you use them, because all of the shimmer powder in the bottles settles to the bottom. So you just shake them up really well. You're good to go. So I'm using those, and I am using some YUPO paper, which I cut in half. So it's A2 sized. And I'm also going to use some of the Silver Sparkle alcohol paper, and I'll get to that in a minute. So I'm working on my Tonic Tim Holtz glass mat here. Highly recommend a glass mat when working with alcohol inks, because otherwise they'll stain and potentially wreck anything else. So any sort of glass surface, like a glass cutting mat, etc., will work. Or just work on something that you're not going to worry about, staining, etc. So I just put blending solution on the YUPO paper first. And if you're not familiar with YUPO paper, it is actually not paper. It is a form of plastic. And it's just really nice when working with alcohol inks, because it really lets them move. You can see how they just move on the surface. So I put blending solution on first because it really helps the inks to move. And again, this is an experimental thing. That's what I really am loving about alcohol inks, is every time you do it, it's different. Every different type of, paper or surface you use can give you different results. Like, I could do this exact same thing with these exact same colors, and it's going to look completely different. So I just dropped on the blending solution, and then I dropped in the inks, and then that little tool I'm using there, that's just a marker, the Ranger marker spritzer. You can use one of the lens cleaners, like the bulb lens cleaners. It's the same concept. That really works. People have used a straw. I personally I don't know what it is. I really don't like the straw method. I just no. So I just like using my marker spritzer it just blows air. So to move the inks around and kind of play with them and all that stuff. So I did all of that, played with it, and then just set that piece aside to completely dry. And then here I'm working on the Silver Sparkle alcohol ink paper. This is meant for alcohol inks. It's from Ranger. I'll have a link to it as well. And the nice thing about this is you can use this with just regular alcohol inks if you don't have the alcohol pearl inks. And you'll get this really neat, kind of sparkly effect anyway, because the paper itself is. But because I'm using the pearl inks, I'm using them on this. And it's really hard to... I'll show it at the end. I'll, turn the flashlight on my phone and all that stuff. But it's a really interesting surface. I'm still having a hard time wrapping my head around it. Like, you can see the inks move really well. I did soak it with the blending solution first, just because, and then drop the inks on. And they move on it almost very similarly to YUPO, but it's, sparkly, and it's really interesting. I'm going to have to play with it some more and just do some more backgrounds and whatnot with it, because it's really pretty. So I did basically the exact same thing. The blending solution, then the pearl inks, and then set everything aside and let it dry. So another reason why I love using my glass mat is, like I said, the alcohol inks clean up. These actually dried for a few hours because I got interrupted by, kids and supper and all that stuff. So I usually try to clean up my alcohol inks before they have a chance to really set and dry, especially the alcohol pearl inks, because that shimmer pigment, it's almost like cement in a way when it really dries. But I find just some hand sanitizer and a baby wipe and a little bit of elbow grease cleans it right up. I prefer to clean it completely off my glass surface so that I don't end up accidentally reactivating it the next time I use alcohol inks or Copic markers or anything like that. I don't want to stain, other projects. So I just clean it up really good and it's good to go. So cleaned it all up. And then to make these into cards, I have the Delicate Flowers stamp set that comes in the May kit that I'm already obsessed with. And this piece is the one on the Silver Sparkle paper. So I don't want to stamp directly on it. I might have to try that though, because it's a very smooth sparkle paper. It is, if you have used other sparkle papers, they have a lot of texture to them, and you technically can't really stamp on them. You're not going to get a clean impression. But I might have to experiment and see what happens with this stuff. But I didn't want to do that. So I took some vellum and I'm just going to white heat emboss some of the images from that stamp set onto the vellum. So I had laid the stamps out on the background first just to kind of give me a rough idea of how I wanted them to, you know, line up and look. And then I'm just going to stamp these onto the vellum. I used my anti-static powder tool first, very generous with that. And then I inked up the stamps with clear embossing ink. And then I'm going to coat all of these with Simon's Detail White embossing powder. And then once I've got those all coated, I actually had to pull out my paintbrush. Pretty sure I touched an area with my fingers that I didn't, you know, cover with the anti-static embossing powder. And so the powder was kind of clinging to that. But I just take a little paintbrush and just wipe that excess away. I'm not as worried about it with this, but with some things, I'll go in, you know, and remove any of that excess powder before melting it with my heat tool, because once it's melted, it's stuck there within reason. So anywho, melted this with my heat tool, which didn't take very long. And then for the other background that I did on just the YUPO paper, I'm going to stamp directly and heat emboss directly on it. Now, like I said, YUPO paper isn't paper. It is plastic. It is not very friendly with heat. This is possible because I did it. If you feel better about it though, the heavyweight YUPO paper works better with heat. I literally just got my hands on some recently. So I will link to it as well though. But the heavyweight YUPO paper holds up a bit better to heat. This regular weight, it's possible. You got to be careful. So I lined up my images again here. I used my anti-static powder tool. I made sure like this background was completely dry, because alcohol ink backgrounds can be sticky until they're dry, but I made sure it was completely dry. I think these had sat overnight before I even like worked on them. Used my anti-static powder tool, stamped the images with clear embossing ink, and then coated them with this detail white embossing powder. Now, again, this is, you'll kind of see it in the video. In real life, it's really obvious, but I let my heat tool heat up, and then I ended up having to pull it away and let it heat up even more. This begins to warp almost immediately. Like this will act like actual plastic. Like it will start to curl up if you're not careful. So highly recommend just either being very careful or doing like I did, you know, with the other ones, and like doing it on vellum, etc. Like this is possible. You need to pay attention and make sure not to overheat anything or melt anything. And the other little disclaimer as well, when working with alcohol inks, well-ventilated area, all those things. Yeah, common sense applies always. So I was able to melt these. It did warp. Not a lot, because I let my heat tool heat up really, really well. But this did warp, like it's kind of like wavy almost. But I'm going to use a ton of foam tape to adhere this to my card base. So I trimmed this down so that it was the same size as the silver sparkle paper. So it's about 3.5 by 5 roughly. And then for the sentiments, I just white heat embossed sentiments from that same Delicate Flowers stamp set onto some cotton candy cardstock. And I had die cut them with the Simon Says Stamp sentiment labels, wafer dies. And then I'm just kind of trimming off the excess on the larger sentiments here, just using my Tim Holtz guillotine paper trimmer. And then for my card bases, it's heavyweight white cardstock. These are standard A2 size cards, so 4 1/4 by 5.5. And I always have to add something to the inside. So I'm just inking up more of the flower stamps from the stamp set, and I'm just inking these up with Distress Oxide inks. So I'm using Picked Raspberry, Mermaid Lagoon, and Peeled Paint, because these 3 colors go perfectly with those 3 alcohol inks I used on the backgrounds. And I'm just stamping these onto the inside. I'm not masking anything because I don't worry about it. Plus, I like the look of it. Like, as usual, there's so many times I'll do something on the inside of my card and I'm like, ooh, this would look really nice as a card front. So I was thinking that with this, I was like, ooh, this would make a really nice card front, but whatever. The insides are really nice too. So I just stamped the flowers and the leaves kind of randomly on the inside of both of these cards with those oxide inks. And then I have the little sentiment strips on the pink, the cotton candy pink cardstock here. And I'm just going to adhere those little sentiments into place with my craft tacky glue. So that's going to finish off the inside. And then for the silver sparkle background, I have all of my vellum pieces here, and I fussy cut these. It didn't take very long. I fussy cut these. I mentioned in the unboxing video, I'm really hoping that Simon releases wafer dies for this set. My assumption is that they will. and hopefully soon. When there's a lot of demand and they're really and people want, especially like a big die set like this, they usually do release them, and I'll let you guys know if and when that happens, because I'll be getting my hands on them, because yeah, this is going to be another favorite set of mine. So I fussy cut these out, and then because they're vellum, adhesive shows through vellum, and I don't want that. So I creatively, like, I lined everything up, and then I used the sentiment, and I had foam tape on the back of it to kind of adhere mostly everything, and then kind of hid the adhesive behind the sentiment and then just on the stems of those little buds there. And then I ended up adding a couple little dabs of adhesive, and I'm just going to cover those with sequins here at the end, just to completely hide any adhesive. And the sequins are from the new release, the Blossoms and Butterflies release. It's the Spring Flowers and Raindrops sequin mixes. And I was like, they're perfect, because there's like really pale pink sequins in the one, and then there's like these blue iridescent ones in the other, which go, again, perfectly with the alcohol ink. It was all meant to be. So I like liberally sprinkle these kind of throughout the card, and then you can see these two here. I just adhere over the little glue dots behind the vellum, because it definitely showed through. So I'm just using my crystal katana to pick up these sequins. I get asked about that katana a lot, whether I still prefer that with a jewel picker. I like the katana for sequins. It's not necessary to have this many tools. Tweezers work great too. I bought this katana, years ago, and I paid a lot of money for it because it's still an expensive tool. So I make use of it. But the jewel picker works great, and tweezers work great too. So anywho, these cards are done. I've turned the flashlight on my phone to try and show, like, so you can see the difference between the YUPO paper on the right and then the silver sparkle alcohol paper on the left. It's really hard to show in a video and photos, but in person, it's just, and the shimmer of the alcohol pearl inks is just so pretty. So these were a lot of fun to make. I will have links below the video. I'll have a supply list. I'll link to all the supplies used. I'll have a link to the heavyweight YUPO paper if you want to check that out. All of that will be in the description box below the video, as well as on my blog. And then I'll also have a link at the end to my unboxing video of the kit, and also a link to the video I did not too long ago using the alcohol pearl inks and making them into Easter egg cards. So you can check that all out here at the end. Thank you guys so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.